Brilliant, thank you so much. Hello, I am Emma's husband. I'm Ruby and JJ's dad. I'm from Australia, but my wife's from Northern Ireland, so we live on the south coast of England, which she thinks is halfway. And I let her think that, and that's the secret of a good marriage. So that's not what I'm here to talk about, but one of the things I think we can do to serve you is Speak Life is an evangelistic ministry, and a lot of what we do is online because of a lot of our lives are lived online, aren't they? And I'm an evangelist, and yet I think so much of my evangelism, even when it's face-to-face, is also digital, because all our lives are lived embodied and physical and face-to-face, but they're also lived online, aren't they? My next-door neighbor, we share a bedroom wall, and yet I think the greatest amount of evangelism that I've done with him has been via text message and WhatsApp, and sending him articles and videos and podcasts and things like that. He lives in rental accommodation, and he's a smoker, and so that means he has to come outside 25 times a day, which is terrible for his health, but I think it's been good for his soul, because he gets to talk to my wife and and I was just reflecting the other day that probably the majority of the ways in which I have shared the gospel with him have been via text message, even though we share a bedroom wall, even though we speak on a daily basis, which is just to say, this corrects my thinking. I constantly think, oh, there's the digital space, which is in the 9th dimension, and then there are physical embodied people, and to be a proper Christian, you need to believe in embodied face-to-face discipleship. You know, Philip baptizes the Ethiopian in physical water, and that requires them to occupy the same space, etc., etc. All of that is true. But you live your physical embodied life with a digital dimension. And so does everybody who you want to reach. And so Speak Life is trying to figure that thing out. And one of the things we do is we've got a course called the 321 course. And it's something that lots of churches do in person. And it's something that lots of people are doing online. And then the people who are doing it online are finding the in-person courses. So we've just hit our 1,000th church that's doing 321 in person, and we've got about 20,000 people who are logged in online, and they are meeting each other, and we've got chat communities and that sort of thing. And we're trying to reflect on the fact that evangelism is both digital and physical, because modern life is both digital and physical. Does that video play? Because if it does, it'd be great if you hit play. If it doesn't, that's okay. No, it's just a picture. No, it promises so much and delivers so little. Which means you have to go into your pocket right now and just type in 321course.com. Just start an account. It's entirely free. We don't spam you. And you can figure out what 321 looks like and how you can use it. I was just talking to Sam at our table. He's in a running club here in London, and figuring out what does evangelism look like for the friend that he runs with on a very regular basis. Well, it might look like, well, let's do the Bible course together, right? It might look like, here's 321course.com. Let's sit down, have a coffee, and do this thing together. These are resources that can really help you in your evangelism. Now, I want to help you in this cultural moment that Andrew's already referred to, in which people have a much greater interest, I'm finding, in Scripture, in church, in the ancient parts of the faith, in the things that are old and weird and challenging and scriptural and sacramental and liturgical at times, and embodied and physical and challenging and pastoral. I think the people who are showing up in my church are people who might have been listening to Jordan Peterson podcasts, or they might have been listening to any number of podcasts in which suddenly it is now more plausible to say, I'm going to take my family to church. There's a number of people on my street, and within the vicinity of where I live, there's probably a half dozen people who, since lockdown, have said to me, I'm taking my family to church, or I've just ordered a Bible, or I've just started an Alpha course, because, well, I guess the Bible has shaped the modern world, and I don't know the first thing about it. So I'm educating myself. And sometimes they take themselves off to churches I wish they wouldn't, but they are showing up, and they want something deep and rich and old and challenging and sacramental and liturgical. I'm at an Anglican evangelical church in Eastbourne, and a lot of people come because on the outside it's got a pointy spire and it looks like the way that churches should look. They are then disappointed that our church is not particularly liturgical or sacramental, right? We have kneelers in our pews, but they are just for the children to sit on during the children's talk. As opposed to, they want standing up and sitting down and kneeling and an embodied faith. They want weekly communion and all these sorts of things that our church ditched in favor of mission. Oh dear. And now when the people show up, they're showing up to evensong in cathedrals, and they are showing up to, and in other realms of the church, they are showing up to charismatic worship in which something is demanded of you, in which it doesn't look tame. It might look a bit wild. It might be the sort of thing that you have to dive into with both feet. But that's what they want. They want to be immersed in something that they don't understand necessarily. That's a challenge to me as an evangelist, because I characterize kind of evangelical evangelism as a little bit like being on the outside of a cathedral in the tourist information booth, and the evangelist has a little pamphlet. And on the pamphlet, we've drawn a little thumbnail sketch of how the cathedral works. And we've explained it in really simple terms so that any inquirer can understand how the different parts of the cathedral work. Is that what you would do if you were in charge of the tourist information booth of a cathedral? Would you do that? You would not do that, would you? You would yank people into this grand exposition of the gospel that people don't understand, but they get lost in. And you would want people to be experiencing this cathedral-like structure. And I think that's what we need to be doing in evangelism, far less of the little thumbnail sketch of how things work, explaining it, flattening it out, making it as simple as possible. The people who are showing up in our churches don't mind that they don't get it straight away. People don't tick like that, right? You start watching Severance, or you start watching Succession, or you start watching a boxed set or a Netflix drama, and the first thing you do is not to go to the Wikipedia page and figure out the character list and get the plot synopses. If you do, you're a monster. You're like you dive into this thing with both feet, and you don't know who is this person, or why are they talking to that guy like this, and like you don't know, but you immerse yourself. Wasn't that amazing with the headphones? You immerse yourself in, you don't know what's going on. That's how people tick, and that's how the gospel is communicated. I want us to figure out how we can explain the gospel, communicate the gospel, immerse people in the gospel in this new age. And one thing I'd like us all to recognize is that you're a believer. Your friends are also believers. They are also immersed in a thought world. They also have moral intuitions. They navigate the world not via reason and evidence and explaining things, because nobody does. Your friends are believers, and you're a believer. And I think that really helps in evangelism, because I live a lot of the time with a faulty notion of it's the Indiana Jones view of faith. Do you know Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade? The leap of faith. Do you remember that? There he is faced by this chasm. And in the popular imagination, this is what faith is, okay? He's got the voice of his father, Sean Connery, saying, "You've got to believe, Indy, you've got to believe." And I rewatched this recently, and I remembered that, oh yeah, Indy puts his hand on his heart, and he closes his eyes, and he puts his boot out, and he steps into the wild unknown, into the darkness. And it turns out that there is an invisible bridge that rewards his faith. And so Indy makes it across the chasm because he believes, because he's a hero. And I think in the modern imagination, faith is like that. Faith is what a few religious specialists do. And they scrunch up their stomach muscles very tightly. And they're able to put their hand on their heart. And because they're a hero, they can summon up within them the requisite belief. And your friends look at you as a faith head, and sometimes they see you and your faith, and they feel like you've hit the jackpot, and they haven't. Sometimes they look at you and they think they've dodged a bullet, and you haven't, right? But they think of faith as something that you do, and they don't. Isn't that how so many people think? I had a friend called Sally all throughout university, and back in the 1900s, I was at university with Sally.
This is Sally.
That video works. Brilliant. In 30 seconds, let's watch that. Okay. So Sally, a very secular person who would never consider herself to be a person of faith. I remember she even wrote me a letter. That really dates me as well. Back in the 1900s, do you remember letters? It was a thing. And she said, "I hope you realize I could never be a believer. I could never be a person of faith." And I remember thinking, this is odd, because Sally had taken a year out after school and volunteered with an NGO, and she was a far nicer human being than I was. And she believed in human rights and equality and all these great things and put them into practice in ways that put me to shame. And so, in a sense, this video is a summary of all the things that I wrote to Sally. Let's have a look.
This is Sally. Sally is a rational person who could never make a leap of faith like Robbie up there. Look at Robbie. He's a faith head, floating around, unsupported by anything. No, Sally simply goes by the evidence and the assured findings of science and reason. I mean, obviously Sally believes that all people are equal. That's just normal. And that society must protect its weakest members, obviously. She is certain that consent is essential to sex, and that education, not coercion, is the path to enlightenment. She trusts science and what it can deliver the world. She is certain that all people should be free, and she's concerned to reform the evils of yesterday as we progress to a brighter tomorrow. Oh, hey Robbie, what are you doing down here? That's right. Sally is a believer. Because none of these morals, assumptions, or deep intuitions are the result of logic or scientific experiments. You can't prove equality, compassion, consent, or any of these values that we live by every day. We believe in these values. We stake our lives on them. But they're not the kinds of things you can deduce logically or demonstrate scientifically. It turns out that Sally is a believer. She doesn't need to make a leap of faith. She's already living at a great height. Day by day, minute by minute, she assumes any number of values that cannot be proven with mathematical certainty. The solid ground she thinks she's standing on is not the ground of simple logic or reason. Actually, the values she lives by are founded on something else, something she might not have considered. And without that foundation, the values she lives by don't really make sense. You see, Sally lives her life based on the values of the Jesus Revolution. She doesn't know that's where her values have come from. She's never been to church. She's never read the Bible for herself. but she's grown up in a culture built by Jesus and the values he has injected into the world. Sally has been assuming some deeply Christian truths all along, even if she never really examined them. But if she takes the time to look where she's standing, she might just find that she's more of a person of faith than she thought. Sally's challenge is not to take a leap of faith. Through the Jesus Revolution, history has already taken an almighty leap. Sally, along with the rest of us, are already in midair. What she needs is some ground beneath her feet, and it's Jesus alone who can provide it. That's the argument of the air we breathe. It charts the advance of the Jesus Revolution from Genesis to the modern day and from equality to progress. It's for the Robbies of the world, who are happy to be known as believers. And it's for the Sallys too, for those who thought that they were incapable of faith. It turns out that through Jesus and the growth of his movement, beliefs are far more common than we think. They are the air we breathe.
So that's the name of a book that I wrote back in 2022, just trying to give a little bit of a map, culturally speaking, to our moment and to what all of us happen to believe, whether we are inside the church or outside the church. Both you and Sally believe in at least these 7 values. Equality, that we are all the moral equal of one another, whether black or white, male or female, rich or poor, we're all equal. You believe that, don't you? If you don't believe that, you get kicked off Facebook pretty quickly. You're a blasphemer. You get excommunicated. These are sacred truths, right? To believe in equality or compassion. You think a society should be judged by the way it treats its weakest members. You believe that? Put that on Facebook. You get loads of likes. Everybody believes that. Consent. Elite men do not have the right to possess the bodies of their so-called inferiors, right? And consent is right at the heart of a sexual relationship. It cannot be a righteous sexual relationship without consent. You believe that. Billions haven't. But you believe that religiously. Quite right, too. You believe that we should forward our ends via nonviolent persuasion and education, and not via violence or force. You believe that. Billions haven't. You do. You believe in science. You believe that somehow this 3 pounds of grey matter is competent to grasp the mysteries of the cosmos. Why should you think that? The brains of Homo sapiens are somehow fit to do science. Why? Every other kind of brain on planet Earth is not fit to do science, not even remotely. But yours is somehow. Why? Why? Freedom. People are not property. And you have the right to self-determination. You believe that, don't you? You're a moral monster if you don't. Billions haven't believed that. You do. You believe that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, right? As Martin Luther King said, or as the Reverend Martin Luther King said, reflecting on the teaching of the prophets. You believe all these things. Why do you believe all these things? None of this is the result of reason and evidence. None of this is the result of a symposium that academics put on one day. None of this is the conclusion to a logical argument. These are beliefs, and they have come uniquely and specifically through the Jesus Revolution. And you might think, oh no, Sally believes these because she's a secular humanist. What we are discovering in our cultural moment is that the humanism doesn't come from the secular. What we are discovering as institutional Christianity is in the rearview mirror, these things have been buoyed up by Christian values the whole time. And you do not derive any of these things from a purely secular view of the world. I mean, just think of a godless view of the world on the question of equality. You know, over here, if you've got a secular view of the world, we are clever chimpanzees, right? We're clever apes, right? With unbreakable human rights, okay? That's the humanist side of things. This is the secular side of things. We're very clever apes with unbreakable human rights. Does that make any sense? Or on compassion, we are the heirs of a brutal evolutionary history, and we should be kind. On consent, you and me, baby, we ain't nothing but mammals. This is really dating me, isn't it, right? So let's honor one another's sexual boundaries at all times. Did we get this from that? We didn't get this from that. Enlightenment. We are the heirs of a brutal evolutionary history, and we should forward our ends only via persuasion and education, and never by violence or force. On science, this brain has evolved purely to track survival, and it can track the deepest mysteries of the cosmos as well. Or on freedom, we are DNA replicators, and to pursue a master race would be an unconscionable evil. Why? I mean, I know why. Because of Jesus, but I don't think it's because of the secular thing. Or progress. We are DNA replicators clinging to an insignificant rock, hurtling through a meaningless universe towards eternal extinction, and things are going to get better. And did we get these things from that? We did not. The historical thing is we did not get these values from a godless worldview. And the logical argument is we could not get these humanist values from a purely godless universe. That's kind of the argument of the air we breathe. And what's interesting about our current cultural moment is that people are ready to hear this argument in a way that they weren't before. Tom Holland wrote his big book, Dominion, in 2019. I think if he wrote his book that's basically charting the progress of the Jesus revolution over 20 centuries, if he wrote it in 1999, people would think, no, all these values, they've just come to us, they're just obvious. It's just natural. It's just universal. It's the air that we breathe. But I think with the retreat of institutional Christianity, people are starting to see that we have been buoyed up by Christian assumptions the entire time. And actually, it's at low tide that we start to recognize what Christianity has given to us. I'm talking a lot about low tide evangelism at the moment. It's a sort of a phrase I'm using about our cultural moment. You know, we talk sometimes about the sea of faith being at high tide. And where are we right now? In 1851, Matthew Arnold wrote his poem called The Sea of Faith. And he said in his day, in 1851, that he felt the melancholy, long withdrawing roar of the Sea of Faith. In 1851, he felt that, right? What would he think today? And this idea that we might be at a low ebb. Well, I think we are at a low ebb. One response to that is Justin Briley's wonderful podcast and book, The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. He makes the point that tides don't only go out, they also come back in. Justin and I are putting on a conference at All Souls Langham Place in November, November 22nd. Block that out in your diary, and we'll think about how we can take advantage of these low tide opportunities, because I think there is something that we can do, not simply to prayerfully expect a tide coming back in. I think there are opportunities that low tide gives to us, and this is what I want to leave you with. There are opportunities in your churches for sharing the good news of Jesus, and that low tide isn't just a challenge, it is, but it isn't just a challenge. I think there are also opportunities at low tide. Let me take you 3 different places as I finish. Around the world, let me take you to 3 low tide locations. First of all, Curio Bay in New Zealand, the southernmost tip of the South Island of New Zealand. And at low tide, a petrified forest is revealed. A forest so ancient it was there when Gondwana land was all one thing, right? And at low tide, you can see this petrified forest that otherwise would be covered over. And I think one of the things that low tide does is it reveals what's ancient. It reveals what was underneath all along. And all these wonderful values about compassion and consent and enlightenment and science and freedom and progress, we might think those things are natural and obvious and universal. I think with the retreat of institutional Christianity, we're recognizing actually what is most natural to the human is cruelty and power and domination. And it's pretty scary, isn't it? And I think a lot of people are scared of the meaning crisis that Andrew's just spoken of. And they're scared of the kind of brutality of a life without faith, of a life without a belief in the inviolable worth and dignity of all humans. And we're starting to wake up to the fact that a belief in human rights is not obvious or natural or universal. In the words of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal. Well, the only thing that's self-evident about human rights is that they are not self-evident. They really aren't. And at low tide, you see that, because at low tide, without Christian foundations, you recognize that humans, without what Christianity teaches, humans are simply clever, mischievous, adaptable apes. And why would you expect anything other than that from the human person? So I think low tide reveals what's ancient. Let me take you to another low tide location, Koh Nang Yuan in Thailand. And that lovely sort of sugary beach, that white powdered sand, is because of the pounding of the waves over millennia. And at low tide, that beach is hidden. At high tide, that beach is hidden. At low tide, you start to see what the sea had always been doing. And I think in our cultural moment right now, we start to see what Christianity had always offered the world. We didn't name it as Christianity until recently. We just thought it was Western secular liberal democracy. We just thought it was secular humanism. That's what we thought. I think more and more, the Tom Hollands of the world, the historian Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man person, you understand, I'm talking about the cool Tom Holland, right? The historian, right? They are able to point out the power and the shaping influence of Christian faith far better in 2025 than they could have done in 2005. Far better. The new atheism could get away with all sorts of nonsense in 2005 because we were at a much higher tide. And they could dismiss Christianity and say, we can just keep all the good stuff from Christianity and get rid of the rest, because Christian assumptions were still a lot more live. We see how false that is now in 2025. Low tide reveals that. And then finally, I think low tide, if we go to Le Mont Saint-Michel, low tide reveals how things connect. At very high tide, the bridge, or the bridges to Le Mont Saint-Michel, are hidden entirely by the sea. At low tide, what is revealed is there is a bridge across. And I think at high tide, you might be a surfer out there just bobbing along on your surfboard. You might just bump into Le Mont Saint-Michel. You just might find yourself drifting towards church at high tide. And I think when the sea of faith is at the full, you can find yourself drifting towards church. At low tide, you've got to make a pilgrimage. You've got to put one foot in front of the other, and people will show up in our churches because they really want to be there. And you'll start asking them questions. We've had a half dozen guys in the last couple of months who have just shown up, and they've got very similar stories. Probably it's a majority of guys, but actually a couple of women as well. And their stories are starting to be, I recognized the emptiness in my life. I ordered a Bible from Amazon. Like, this is the story of the guy the other day. Ordered a Bible from Amazon, and I was like, oh, what translation? He said, oh, the old one. I was like, King James? He said, yeah, that's the one. I was like, okay. Where did you start? He was like, the beginning. Like, okay. Great. We should do the Bible course with him. That would be great to do with him, wouldn't it? And people are showing up wanting something deep and rich and old and challenging and humanizing. I was saying to Sam on our table, what we need to preach when they come is the incredibly humane and humanizing message of Scripture. Because they are actually expecting wisdom and sanity and groundedness and something that they can apply into their lives. And this is not a call for just, let's do practical sermons on how to, deal with your finances. I believe you need to preach Jesus. But preaching Jesus to people as they come. Let's not treat the Bible as a specialist text for super spiritual Christians to fine-tune their discipleship, but as the Word of God, which is also a humane and humanizing word that makes the simple wise. And what I'm discovering, and what we're discovering in our church, and I'm talking to church leaders all over the country, all over the world, and they are saying they're seeing similar things, that people are coming to find what is deep and old and rich and wise and challenging and applicable. And our evangelism and our pastoral care is just one thing now in our churches, because people are coming with very messed up lives. They're not from church backgrounds. And we just go for long walks across the South Downs, and we end up in a pub and we talk a lot from Scripture. But evangelism and pastoral care are becoming united, and I think that's a really good thing. Because at the end of the day, pastoral care is just evangelizing Christians, right? And evangelism is just pastoring non-Christians, isn't it? And this is a tremendous opportunity. I think Low Tide is offering us these kinds of opportunities. And I'd love us to think about what that means for your church, what the challenges are of Low Tide in your churches, and what the opportunities of Low Tide are in your churches. So let's just go to those questions. What are the Low Tide challenges that you are seeing? I've mainly lent into the opportunities, but you might be sitting there thinking, oh gosh, but it's hard. Great, name that. But what are the opportunities? In terms of our mission strategies, what needs to change? What needs to stay the same in this cultural moment? In fact, maybe what even needs to be turned up? Maybe you need to lean into some of the more sacramental, liturgical sort of stuff that I was talking about. Are those questions that you can figure out? Brilliant. Thanks so much.